Good afternoon YouTube, Warbles on a lot here, with yet another movie in the SunFoil 5th prototype construction series, and this one's going to be a long one because we've had a bit of a Eureka moment with the debunkers. First up, to the work in progress. This is the Mark V, painted with grey primer. Now I'm not a carpenter, I'm a wood carver, and this thing doesn't have to get through the air at 400 mile an hour like a propeller tip does. So I have left a few little bumps and lumps on it because I was trying to get the thing finished in time for my son's birthday. That didn't happen. It's not even going to get up there for the anniversary of 3 years to the day of the Mark II going onto his car, but it's looking pretty good, and I would rather leave 24 hours between each coat of paint and let it dry properly than try and rush the job just to get it up there on the day and have the paint fall off and the wood fill up with water and go rotten. And that's what this grey primer is all about. Okay? You got to make sure that no water can get at it. So, I reckon this is looking pretty good. Now, on to the breakthrough. Last night, I got comments from a fella called Alternator, acknowledging that he admits that my fuel burn and distance recordings are genuine. And that to me is a really major breakthrough, because for 6 months Alternator has been saying, I greatly doubt that they're correct. Last week he got to the point of telling somebody else, the big governor, that he regarded my fuel flow figures as wishful thinking. And he said that while I was in the middle of a flame war with Gary, and that caused all sorts of other shit, because I had zero tolerance of naysayers and dissenters, and I went fizz-bang pop and shouted at the debunkers because I had a head of steam worked up from being cranky at Gary and the Amendamites. You get that. Finally I calmed down, and yesterday I uploaded a couple of clips to the big governor and Alternator, and I showed them my fuel flow figures, how I measure it, how I record it, and what my son did to record it. And I think it was my son's figures that impressed him more than mine. Whereas my figures, I write the date, and I write the odometer meeting, and I write the trip meter reading, and I write the transaction, and I write the price per litre, and I write how much money I spent in green, and then in black I write the analysis. And I do the analysis, well, this is on the 4th of the 11th, and that was on the 17th of the 9th, alright? So, you got 2 months, right? And 1,246.2 kilometres, 117.1 litres, 10.65 kilometres to the hour, to the litre. This is about the 4th time I've tried to shoot this, and I'm in kind of a hurry, so I'm going to leave that blooper in. Okay? Finally they got their head around the idea that I do long baseline fuel recordings, and if there's 4.5 litres in the bottom of the tank at the start and 5 litres in the bottom of the tank at the top, well, okay, who cares? It's over such a long baseline that half a litre difference in the reserve figure doesn't really matter. Whereas it's possible over a fortnight to convince yourself you're getting 11.918 kilometres to the litre. When I started recording here on the 20th of May 2011, cruising at 105 kilometres per hour for the 75% of my time on the highway, and I did that for a year, so that on the 21st of May 2012 I had done 8,839.4 kilometres, 858.35 litres, 10.298 kilometres to the litre for a year. Whereas, before I put the Mark I SunFoil on the roof, when I were cruising at 90 kilometres per hour, 9.39 kilometres to the litre, 8.39 kilometres to the litre, 8.75 kilometres to the litre, 9.46 kilometres to the litre averaged over that page. So, Alternator and the big governor accept that I am cruising 15% faster and burning 7.6% less fuel, which means they have to rethink their entire theory. And Hatomariff has come up with his idea on where I'm saving the fuel, and he and I disagree on that at the moment. But the important thing is, the debunkers have admitted that my experiment is real, it's valid, it's genuine, it's not wishful thinking, it's not delusional. Warbles on a lot, the hillbilly hermit, the fool on the hill, the autodidactic test pilot, and the last person to fly the world's first legal minimum aircraft, which today hangs in the Infrared Transport Museum. Search 8 horsepower 1975 Skycraft Scout to look at that little beauty. Warbles on a lot, who sent the results of 500 illegal aero tows to the Civil Aviation Safety Authority in 1997, and 5 months later they mandated that if you want to be towed behind a hang glider, if you want to be towed in a hang glider behind an ultralight in Australia, you have to do it using the pilot-induced oscillation and lockout index, dreamt up by this little mug. Search aero towing regalos to see that little story. Only 2 people died for me to get that one put through. Yeah, Warbles on a lot has identified a serious major black hole in motorcar design, which is really easy to fix. You can plug that hole with a streamlined solar panel and it works. Okay, and Hatomariff reckons he can come up with some circuitry that'll make it work even better. I don't know whether he can. I think to make it work even better, you would have to run your alternator on an exhaust gas power recovery turbine, a step down gearbox, reduction gearbox, and a shaft to bring the pulley up to the line of all the other accessories. You might be able to run your air conditioner on it as well. Turbine accessory drive rather than belts off the crankshaft, right? Because the exhaust gas is just being wasted. You need all the shaft output to drive the gearbox. But the thing that really swayed Hatomariff was the fact that my son is a fill the tank up to the top and ride it down style of a person. Okay, and because he was an apprentice doing his lectures in Tamworth, we got comparable measurements, country town driving, large country town, big enough to be called a city driving with a rush hour, and highway driving, both going up the hill and going down the hill. And I read to him from the transcript of his fuel log. And I showed him that the highway is the unbroken line, driving in Glen Innes, the little country town's the dotty line, and the dashy line is Tamworth. Okay? And the really important thing is that by synchronicity his alternator died somewhere on that little stretch there. Okay? So he drove for 4 days with no alternator, simply a solar panel, feeding the battery, and that started his engine and got him to work and probably gave him about 5 minutes worth of headlights coming home at night. So in litres per 100 kilometres, his fuel flow went from 15 litres per 100 driving in town before his alternator died. He got a bit of a fuel saving when his alternator was dead, but it had sucked a lot of torque while it was dying. When he put a new alternator into the car, 30 litres per 100 k's as against 15, right? That is the effect of a flat battery sucking on the alternator. In terms of kilometres per litre, right, he had a very, very similar upsetting thing go on. I think that was 3.2 or something, kilometres to the litre down there. The dashed line shows he's driving around Tamworth figures. Put the solar panel on. Next time he goes to Tamworth, 38% better fuel economy. On the highway, yeah, he got a high point of 28%, but that, 29.8, that was the day he nearly hit a kangaroo and it frightened him and he slowed right down. But the high point here is driving down to Tamworth, down 2,000 feet. The low point there is driving back up 2,000 feet. So let's just say, sorry, that I'm chasing bits of paper with the other hand. Let's just say that that is an average figure of 15% improvement on the highway. And there's nothing wrong with that figure, okay? The one in Glen Innes varies a bit because that was when he had not driven to Tamworth for 2.5 months and the 20 watt panel was not big enough to keep his battery topped up. So, if we say that the Brumby saved 15% of its fuel burn on the highway and 38% of its fuel burn in city traffic. And bear in mind, in that city traffic figure, it had just done a 200 kilometre trip to make sure the battery was fully charged before it spent a couple of days driving around in Tamworth. So that's comparable to what happens if you've got a proper full-sized SunFoil on the car. Like mine's a 30-watt panel. So I don't get this business of have the fuel burn get worse unless I go for a long drive once a month. Right? I've got a big enough panel that I can keep, my fuel burn saving all the time. Now, the only thing that we're arguing over now, me and the boffins, is that I reckon this segment of the fuel burn saving is caused by having the battery full when you start the engine, so you're not burning fuel to kiss and make up to a flat battery for time in the car park. This little bit is the direct saving from running your spark plugs and your fuel pump and your radio on sunlight instead of running it on engine-powered alternator. This little bit here is the aerodynamic fuel saving because I'm a low-speed aerodynamics consultant and I'm a smart ass, alright? So, running your spark plugs on petrol in my car, I reckon I'm saving 635 mils a week. The aerodynamics is saving 669 mils per week. And the rest of the 5.33 litres per week, I reckon, is being saved by not having a flat battery when I start the car. So Hatomorif is trying to work out an electrical circuit that will do something better than what I've already achieved with off-the-shelf components. If he can, well and good. Alright? I'm pretty happy with what I'm doing at the moment, and I think, as an absolute sort of blind guess, if you put a SunFoil on every car in the world, you would have an average fuel saving, because most of them are in the cities, most of them are doing short engine runs, most of them are not out there on the highway, most of them are going to get the 38 to probably 60% saving that you'll get, because most of them are newer cars. My son's car had a 1.5 to 1 alternator step-up ratio because he'd replaced the alternator with a Mitsubishi stuck in a Subaru. So if he'd had a 2 to 1 step-up ratio, he would have saved more fuel than his 4.22 litres a week. I'm saving 5.33 litres a week, and I've got the same engine, a 50 amp alternator and a 2 to 1 step-up. Right, so the people who've got a 3 to 1 step-up drive and a bigger electrical system and a bigger motor driving the bigger alternator, they're going to save more fuel. They might save 60% of their fuel burn in the city and 15% on the highway. So that's 75 divided by 2, 35%. Can we save a third of the world's fuel burn? If so, how much is that? Well, how many cars does it take to wear out that many tyres? Do you know how much fuel the world burns in a day? Well, because I read New Scientist, I actually happen to be in possession of that information. Worldwide oil use. Road transport accounts for half the world's daily oil consumption of 90 million barrels per day. 50% road, 18% heat power, 16% non-fuel, 8% air, 8% sea. Alright, non-fuel, that would be bitumen on the roads. Here we see it displayed another way. This black stuff is diesel gas oil. This dark blue stuff is petrol. Okay? So here's my claim. If I could wave a magic wand and put a Mark 3 or a Mark 5 SunFoil on every road vehicle in the world, so that the solar panel delivers 1.1 times the battery's minimum daily recharge requirement in 2 hours of full sun or 10 hours of a rainy day, it'd save 15 million barrels of oil per day. That is my contribution to your global warming problem, planet Earth. Get onto it, please. I'm serious. I'm not joking. The best debunkers in the world, Knowledge Monker, Hatomorif and Big Governor, have busted their teeth on this. I'm not lying. It's up to you now. All I can do is sit up here and finish the SunFoil to put on my son's car. Ciao.